Hello, good afternoon, welcome, or good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the 22nd episode of Season 2 of Atlas Information Live. This is going to be our final episode of the Core Practices series that we began a number of weeks ago now. All of our live streams have been culminating in this particular episode because, after all, the title of this episode is Awakening. And what are we doing all of our practices? Why are we making all of these efforts on the path if not to awaken, if not to progress? But there are a great many misconceptions about awakening. And many of these misconceptions relate to awakening in the astral plane, so-called astral projection or astral travel, or lucid dreaming. There are many different ways people interpret or understand that particular practice. And unfortunately, many have a misconstrued concept as to what is actually taking place and what, if anything, they are accomplishing. So it's important today to bring to synthesis all of the live streams that we've done related to core practices on the path of awakening and self-realization of the being, and see how they all culminate in producing the effects which we are searching for, which we are seeking, self-evident experiential knowledge of our higher self. That it is that which we seek. That is what it means to awaken. To awaken means to know, to be. And who or what are we being? Precisely that, our being. It is precisely our capacity to know ourselves and be able to live from that perspective with that knowing. That is what it means to be awake. There may be many, many interpretations and many, many theories and many, many ideas and beliefs, but we're not interested in theories and beliefs. We're interested in the facts. We're interested in self-evident experiential knowledge. That is what we seek on the path. And that is what all of our efforts and all of our core practices are leading toward. So whatever you may believe or whatever you may have read, what others may have said, is of no value if their statements, if that information doesn't come from their own direct experiential knowledge. It's of no value because they just are regurgitating what they read or what they heard or what somebody else said, or they're just making it up. They're just listening to the machinations of their own ego mind, and they have their various different theories or beliefs or opinions on the matter of awakening. And the first challenge that we face in the modern era when it comes to awakening is the degeneration of the word itself. You have multiple different contingencies or groups or even political movements which have absconded the term. They have appropriated and indeed misappropriated the term in relation to political beliefs, ideology, or belief in or recognition of various different conspiracy theories, or social justice. There are many different people and groups who believe they are awake. And they call themselves awake. They think of themselves awake. And they are propagating whatever beliefs, opinions, philosophies, ideologies that they have, or indeed dogmas, as the case may be, encouraging others to accept their beliefs, their dogmas, their ideologies, their philosophies, their mentality, so that they too can awaken and be like them, awake. But these people are all asleep. None of them have awakened their consciousness. None of them know, let alone practice, the core practices which we have been discussing over the past few weeks. They may have heard about mindfulness. They may believe that they practice meditation. They may have read about sacred sexuality, and indeed, they may believe that they practice sacred sexuality with multiple partners, no less. And they are all asleep, and none of their practices, none of how they practice their practices are bringing them closer to awakening. And that's a fact. If anything, their practices are bringing them closer to awakening in the opposite direction. Awakening negatively, awakening as a demon. This is universally misunderstood. This is a fact which you will never hear about or read about in any New Age book or bookstore. There is absolutely no mention whatsoever about awakening negatively, what that entails, and what leads to that. And the reason why you don't hear about it or read about it is because the forces behind things like New Age bookstores and the countless books which are talking about awakening. And they, of course, promise awakening in the positive way. They don't mention awakening in the negative way because those books are precisely assisting their readers in accomplishing just that, awakening in the negative way, awakening negatively, awakening through their ego, awakening their ego. You might be asking yourself, how is that even possible? Well, it's possible because egos only hold sway over us by virtue of the consciousness which they have stolen, the consciousness which they have surrounded, which they have consumed, which they have wrapped themselves around, and which they have subjected. The consciousness inside is still consciousness, but it is under the control of a legion of egos, different individual psychological aggregates, each having its own agenda and each following its own protocol, its own programming. So the consciousness inside of it, expressing itself or receiving, gets filtered through that algorithm, that mechanical programming of the ego which surrounds it. Now, the more powerful the consciousness, the more powerful the ego surrounding it. And if one practices Indeed, any of the practices which we have been discussing these past few weeks, any of the core practices, but particularly those related to transmutation and harnessing and utilizing of the sexual force, particularly those, but not exclusive to those. Because as we discussed in the live stream on transmutation, all of the practices transmute energy. Meditation, mindfulness, self-observation, self-remembering, mantras, and runes, all of these practices transmute the sexual force. All of them harness the sexual force. So if you harness the sexual force in a positive way, it's self-evident that sexual force can be harnessed in a negative way. Whether you are aware that that is what you are doing or not. Because we live in a universe of cause and effect. We live in a scientific universe. And metaphysical science, even though it's not a science related to matter, it is metaphysical, and it's a science that applies to and underlies the physical universe. It is the science of the foundation of the physical universe. But nonetheless, the great law of cause and effect, of karma, still applies, which means that if you do the requisite causes, you will produce the necessary and inevitable effects. There is no avoiding that. So all of these, we keep using the word new age, but that's a catch-all title. It's a catch-all phrase used to describe all of these so-called modern spiritual movements and gurus and their books. And all of the individuals following those practices and doing those practices, they believe that they're awakening in the right way, but they're harnessing the sexual force, they're utilizing the sexual force in a negative way. So the results are going to be negative. They are going to awaken negatively. If they awaken their consciousness, if they awaken that aspect of their consciousness, which is bottled up inside of ego, then the ego itself will awaken. The egos themselves, the demons, they will crystallize. They will awaken. And that individual will be lost. Redemption is always a possibility, but for all intents and purposes, they will have awoken negatively. And they will believe, they will continue to believe what they believe, which is that they are on the right path, that they are on the path to God. It's one of the interesting phenomena about black magicians and demons. They see the White Lodge as the enemy, naturally, but they see angels as demons. They have their own complete theosophy explaining how the Elohim and the archangel, the cosmo creators, are all devious tyrants who just want to enslave us. In fact, much of what they say is very similar to what those in the White Lodge say about them. There are obviously differences, but the general feeling is there. That is our adversary, and they must be dominated and or eliminated, whatever the case may be, but certainly dominated. Because if we don't dominate them, they are going to try to eliminate us or dominate us. Can't have that. So as a result, the Black Lodge is very good at this. It's their job. It's their job. So divinely ordained purpose is to twist, tempt, corrupt, and make fall all that is good and pure and of the light. So naturally, they were going to co-opt and twist and corrupt the word awaken. And naturally, they were going to abscond and use that term and apply it to themselves and their own dark teachings. Incidentally, there's Azazel in the chat, and we almost forgot, but here's the link to join in the discussion if you so choose. So what actually then can we speak in a specific way as to the nature of awakening? Does a moment come where 1 minute you're asleep and the next minute you're awake? It's a good question. Because awakening is also termed enlightenment. To awaken the consciousness. To be awake means to be a Buddha. To be enlightened. Now, that doesn't mean that you are a self-realized master. There are levels and levels and levels. Awakening or enlightenment is like the first level. That's what gets you onto the spiral path. That's what gets you into nirvana. It allows you to be a nirvana, a pratyeka Buddha. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But to be enlightened, there are two, it's a double entendre. There are two ways of hearing that word, to enlighten, and visualizing that. Clearly, the first way is to visualize someone who is in the light. They have an illuminated consciousness. So the light beams forth from them and they walk and are in the light, as it were. Like, for example, all of that religious art, which shows various saints or angels or masters that have halos about their heads. This notion that they are resplendent now. They are enlightened. Their pineal gland and their third eye is open. And so the light fills their consciousness. They are aware, they know. But a second way to visualize enlightenment, more importantly, the process of enlightenment, is one who begins the journey with a great heavy burden, carrying some great rucksack on their back. And this sack is filled with heavy stones. And all of us, in one way, shape, or form, can relate to that. All of us began our journey of spirituality, the path that we are on, in this life or in certainly previous lives. We began this journey carrying a heavy burden. And if over the course of our journey we faced great suffering, many trials and many tests of willpower, tests of endurance, tests of patience, tests of courage, tests which challenged our virtue in many ways, and challenged our loyalty, our dedication, our devotion, our humility, our determination to continue on the path. At each and every turn along that path, as we faced various tests and challenges, if we succeeded, we may have felt a stone get removed from the pack on our back. We may have felt that our journey has become a little less burdensome, a little less cumbersome. We may feel that now we walk with a lighter step, with a lighter heart. In other words, we are more enlightened. This is the dual meaning of that word. Whereas awakening really has awakening also contains the dual meaning. To be more awake means you are less asleep. And what do we associate with sleep? Drowsiness, heaviness, the heaviness of the eyelids. Hello, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Fine. How are you?
We're doing okay. Thank you. Glad you could join us.
Yeah.
Everyone, this is Azazel. If you've been on the live streams before, you know him. And Azazel doesn't do anything special. All he does is he clicks on the link, which we put in the chat, and it's here on the screen. So if you want to join the conversation, you're more than welcome. So the process then of awakening is very much a result of lightening the load, of lightening the burden which we carry with us. And that burden is karmic. That burden is our karma. And the manifestations of that burden are our egos, our defects and vices, which attract into our life all of those tests, trials, and ordeals. And they attract into our life everything which makes life difficult and fills us with suffering. Because like attracts like, and our egos will always attract that which will trigger them and bring them to the surface. And our egos are what cause us our suffering. So the triggering events are going to keep coming so long as we have those egos. So to eliminate the burden, to lift the burden from our shoulders, is a process of knowing ourselves, of comprehending our egos, and ridding ourselves of those egos. And as we rid ourselves of those egos, that heaviness, that burden that we carry, lightens. And metaphysically, scientifically speaking, the consciousness that was bottled up inside of those egos is liberated. So one may think about, again, to use a visualization, imagine the difference between having one gigantic hot air balloon or having thousands of little rubber balloons, each filled with hot air. Excuse me. Now you might say, well, what's the difference? It's all balloons, it's all hot air, it's all pulling you up. Yes, but you know that when you go to the carnival, there's a clown walking around with 100 hot air balloons on strings. That clown does not take off into the air. And the reason why the clown does not take off into the air is because all of the rubber in all of those balloons weighs enough that the helium in those balloons is never going to be enough to carry the extra weight of an individual up into the sky. It's just not possible, the physics. But if you were to eliminate all of that unnecessary surface area and take the same volume of helium and put it into one single balloon, then it's very likely that there would be enough lift to take you up into the sky. And that's really what we're doing when we're liberating consciousness from these egos that we carry. The consciousness inside of them, they can take on various characteristics of that consciousness, which is why egos are so convincing. Egos are horribly convincing. They're terribly good at what they do. Partly because they have so much consciousness inside of them that they are working with. Because the consciousness is only capable of truth. And that's why we made that one meme that we talked about, 90% truth can kill. And the most dangerous lies are not so much lies as they are slight alterations to the truth. Just a little twist. Because 90% is true, but just that last little itty bitty bit that's enough to take it and turn it into a complete 180 degrees. But it's still based on 90% of what it's based on is true. And so it's so easy for us to be sucked in by that. We're so gullible. We're so naive. We listen to our mind. People say, listen to your body. Well, yes, okay, we have to listen to our body, but we have to have discernment. Our body is going to tell us things that it wants all the time. And if you just listen to your body all the time, you're going to be indulging your egos all the time. Because our egos can infect our body. Not just our mind, not just our emotions, but our physical body, our energetic body, our vital body. And of course, our physical body. You've heard about the mind-body connection. Well, if the mind-body connection works in a positive way, why wouldn't it equally work in a negative way? If egos can infect our mind, and there's a mind-body connection, then why is it that we assume that our body is innocent? Because it's natural? Because it can't possibly think for itself? Why? Why do we assume that? Because our egos want us to believe that. That's the only reason why we think that. Because there is no truthful, natural reason. And in fact, from a Gnostic perspective, we need to be suspicious of what our body says. Because our body belongs to mechanical nature. Our body is on loan from mechanical nature. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Our body will return to mechanical nature. It's on loan. And our body obeys, and we all know this if we have spent any time whatsoever observing our body, observing ourselves. We know that our body follows the laws of mechanical nature. Not divine nature, mechanical nature. And one of the reasons why we do the practices that we do, why we do meditation, is to get out of the body. And why we do astral projection is to get out of the physical body. Precisely so that we can have experiences that we can't have while we are in the physical body. Because the physical body is a prison. It's a useful prison. No question about it. We are not encouraging you to hate your body. That's not what this is about. But know the limitations, and that the body, just like the mind, just like the heart, is the stomping grounds of our many egos. So, awakening consciousness, which is bottled up inside the egos, consciousness, which is bottled up inside the ego mind, ego heart, ego body, we are awakening as a self-conscious machine, an AI, if you will. And this is the origin of all of those science fiction movies that talk about malevolent AI, which then create a war against humanity. These AI that achieve self-awareness. That's an awakened demon. That's a black magician. And that's someone who recognizes that, and then they know what they are, or they believe they know what they are, and they see anything that is good and pure and of the light as the adversary from that point forward. In the same way that in the Matrix, the AI see humanity as the adversary and the thing that needs to be enslaved. It's the same as in Terminator, where Skynet achieves self-awareness and then humanity tries to shut it down. So Skynet launches the nuclear missiles to rid itself of its adversary, humanity. That's what these modern allegories are trying to tell us. But the awareness, the self-awareness that these AI achieve comes from the programming that humanity provides them. So there's a self-awareness which is acquired from humanity, which then becomes the tool, the power that the AIs use to enslave humanity with. So it's this vicious cycle. So anyone who's trapped in their ego, that longs for power, that longs to develop abilities, powers, they want to harness their power for worldly gain, let's say. They want to manifest their desires. They want to manifest wealth. They want to manifest a new lover. Or they want to manifest love or unlimited abundance, or all of these buzzwords and catchphrases that you may hear in spiritual circles. Or they want to manifest success, worldly success, success in career, success in their business, as an entrepreneur, as an actor, as a singer, as a songwriter, whatever. But they want to harness the metaphysical world for their own benefit, but for their benefit. And sure, they will rationalize to themselves, and they will rationalize to you that, oh, but once I have unlimited abundance, I can share it with the whole world. And once I'm rich and famous and powerful, I can do great things for others. Well, that's how they will frame it. And truth be told, in public, ask any multimillionaire or billionaire or super powerful, influential individual, and they will have various different charities and various different activities and philanthropic organizations, philanthropic activities, they all give back in their own way. But to an individual on the path who is seeking that from the get-go, that's because their burden, which they feel, they are not interested in lightening the burden. They are interested in becoming stronger to continue to carry the burden, but to build up their strength, their worldly strength to carry that worldly burden. And they will harness their otherworldly energies, their metaphysical strength. That's how they transmute it. That's how they convert it. That's how they work with the sexual force. To make themselves, their lower selves, their false selves, stronger, to have more endurance, or to have more capacity and or the ability to have the freedom and wherewithal to have comfort and security at regular intervals so that they can recover from carrying this heavy burden. And so that they can have plenty of distractions, plenty of pleasures, which they can use to offset the pain and suffering that they endure carrying this heavy burden. Because that burden, it's not just rocks. That burden is very clever. That burden is very subtle. That burden has its own intelligentsia. We all know this. We all have heard the voices in our head. We all have felt the urges, the desires, the temptations in our heart and in our body and in our mind. We know that the adversary is not a dumb rock. It's not. And if we don't know that, we have more work to do on ourselves. We have more self-observation ahead of us. If we believe that our egos will go quietly into the night by just letting go of them, we are fooling ourselves. So because of this, there are many, 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 many individuals, far more than we would like to admit, who are awakening negatively. And they are on the wrong path. They believe that they're on the right path, but they've been misled. One of the easiest ways to trick individuals into awakening negatively is the astral plane. And the reason why it's so easy to dupe individuals in the astral plane is because it's an out-of-body experience. And no one outside of those who study gnosis No one knows of the lunar astral plane and the solar astral plane. Sometimes you may hear vague references to the lower astral and the upper astral in places here and there. But we mean in general spiritual parlance, lucid dreaming and whatnot. No one ever mentions that. If you go into a New Age bookstore and pick up a book on astral projection, you will not find any reference to a lunar astral plane and a solar astral plane in there. Same as if you pick up a book on psychedelics and psychedelic use. People assume that if you go on a trip, you're in heaven. You're traveling the universe. You're in the fifth dimension. And you're awake. But you're not awake. You are awake in a sense. But if you are awake in the lunar astral plane, then you are awakening negatively. You are awake in and through your ego. That is why when you do psychedelics, you're going through and it's always you. It's always you're having that experience. It's always from the perspective of your ego self that you're having that experience. And why you can have quote unquote bad trips, which Mother Ayahuasca is very good at doing, because that's what she's good at doing, is taking you into hell to face your demons. And ayahuasca is particularly useful or beneficial for those who are suffering from terrible, terrible demons that they cannot comprehend and they cannot face. Ayahuasca is useful at showing them that. Now, how would that be possible if ayahuasca was taking you to heaven? Are your demons hanging out with the angels? Is that what's going on? And ayahuasca takes you to heaven, and you're having a conversation with the archangel Michael one moment, the next moment, boom, there's your demon. Is that possible? So this whole issue around awakening, we need to comprehend that the core practices and the way that we were sharing them was in a way for us to recognize the dedication, the commitment, the willpower, and the sacrifice which is required to achieve genuine awakening, genuine enlightenment. We have to unload ourselves from this burden, this karmic burden that we carry. It is possible to do practices, harness sexual energy, awaken powers, and be able to even perform miracles and manifest desires and all sorts of incredible things without eliminating that karmic burden that we're carrying. But here it's important to recognize that that karmic burden is on a set of scales. And we carry that heavy burden because we have kept withdrawing from the universe, from the bank account of the universe. We keep borrowing from the universe for ourselves. And it's that karmic debt just grows and grows and grows and grows. And that is what we carry. So now if you take your gifts, your God-given gifts, the gifts of your divine mother, the gifts that the universe has given you, your energy, your consciousness, your time, all of that, your willpower, and you apply all of that to alleviating the debt that the burden of debt that you're carrying by making yourself stronger. You're just accruing more debt. It's like somebody who is drowning in credit card debt, and their answer is to go out and take a line of credit and to draw down on the line of credit to pay the interest on the credit cards. This is unsustainable. You can't continue doing this forever. So that's why people come up with Ponzi schemes and the pyramid scheme, whereby someone at the top, right, takes a whole bunch from a whole lot of souls beneath them. And this is how they endure. This is how they sustain, because all that debt is spread to those at the bottom of the pyramid. But no Ponzi scheme can continue forever. Eventually, a day of reckoning will come and the whole thing collapses. But in any case, regardless, someone who comes to the path of awakening and starts working with the sexual force and starts doing their practices, and their focus is me, and what I want and my desires and fulfilling my desires and manifesting my desires and getting powers and getting this and getting that and becoming clairvoyant and being able to see the future and being able to see auras and being able to tell people's fortunes. And then what do? When they awaken some of these powers is they go on the internet and they call themselves awake and a spiritual master, spiritual guru, and they start charging money to people for spiritual advice and for spiritual guidance and spiritual teaching, which, if they knew anything about the great law, if they knew anything about the path, they would know is a crime. It's a violation of the great law. It's a violation to charge money. Do you find anywhere in any Bible or in any scripture, anywhere, whether it's Jesus or Moses or Muhammad or Krishna or Quetzalcoatl, you find me the reference where these masters went out and set up a little booth or a little tent and put out a sign that said spiritual guidance, 5 shekels. You find me the biblical reference, mail it to me, and I will eat it. I will eat that letter, envelope, and postage and all. If you can find me the reference where there's an authentic spiritual master from anywhere throughout history who charged money, and it's written in the scriptures that they charged money from their followers. I can't recall, even in any of the Gnostic Gospels, Jesus, I don't think that after he raised Lazarus from the dead, he said to Lazarus, now you know you owe me one, right?
No, he did the opposite, in fact.
Right? So this is absurd. It's patently absurd. that you have people going around, and some of them, if you want to, like, because there's a whole spectrum of these, like, it runs the gambit from you might call like the sort of like Eckhart Tolle's, or maybe somewhere in the middle, all the way over here, which you might find the what do you call them, the like the evangelical right wing born again Christian pastors and televangelists, who with their mega churches and all that stuff, they like Joel Osteen, right, who lives in his 28 million square foot mansion that has a helicopter pad and everything else, right? And he's built a mega church, which is basically a stadium, right? And it fits like what, 50, 60, 70, 80,000 people. It's something, it's ridiculous. It's like a football stadium, but it's a church. And so those people over there, you have the Eckhart Tolle somewhere in the middle, and then all the way on the other side, sort of down the spirituality spectrum, you get into the kind of the self-help gurus, the Tony Robbins of the world, who teach the power of positive thinking and so on. So you have this wide spectrum, and then down that Tony Robbins end of the spectrum, you have all of these like business coaches and entrepreneurial coaches, and that are all wrapping up their consulting in life coaching and realizing your dreams and realizing what you want. And oh, I'm a life coach, right? And I'll help you with your business. I'll help you with your entrepreneurship because I'm a life coach. And really, all of them across the entire spectrum, they are appealing, they are harnessing truths known to the consciousness, but appealing to desires of the ego, and how those two things are intertwined in us because of our consciousness that's bottled up inside of the ego. They know that if someone has a deep longing to awaken, that they can package their awakening so that it targets that consciousness which is inside of the ego, which means that they have a follower for life, because they'll never reveal all the secrets so that they can awaken and become on their same level. They don't want that. They want them to always be beneath them, always be following them, always be chasing them. So they have to keep coming to their seminars and have to keep buying their books and have to keep buying their meditation CDs and their subliminal CDs and whatever that they, you put in your ears when you go to sleep, so that the entire 8 hours that you sleep, you have Tony Robbins whispering in your ear going, "You will give me more money," right? That's Benjamin. Okay, so let's just pop up for a second here. Benjamin says about the Apostle Paul asking for donations. That is why some churches use these Bible verses as an excuse to ask for donations too. Okay, let's be clear on what the difference between a donation and a charge is. Okay, a donation is voluntary. We have to be realistic. Everybody lives in the real world, even masters and teachers and what have you. They, according to the law, you cannot deny someone the teachings, and you cannot withhold your counsel or withhold your help from them if they are unwilling or unable to pay. But there's absolutely nothing preventing you from accepting their gratitude. If someone chooses to make a donation because they find the knowledge or the counseling, the advice or the help which you have given them, and they wish to express their gratitude to you, then there is nothing preventing you from accepting that. That's perfectly fine. In fact, it would be wrong of you not to accept it on some sort of self-righteous moral ground or some sort of ethical thing. No, 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 I can't take your money, because you'll probably end up insulting them. Most people, they don't have another way of expressing their gratitude in exchange for something of value. You gave them something that they value, and they want to show their appreciation by offering you some token of their appreciation. So accept it. You can accept a donation. You can accept a gift. Jesus received many gifts. In fact, on the day he was born, the three wise men came with gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold. So let us be clear on the difference between what a donation is and what a charge is. Benjamin follows up and says, this is the favorite verse used by churches. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Yeah. There you go. There's nothing wrong with that. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion. That's exactly what that phrase is saying, which means that if you don't want to give anything, you don't have to. That's what a donation is. Now, the church, if you want to talk about the Catholic Church specifically, from which all the Christian churches were born, one of the causes of the Protestant Reformation was the selling of indulgences. We don't know if you're aware of that part of the church's history, but that's when the Catholic Church was selling absolution for sins. So that if you were rich enough, you could kill as many people you wanted or rape as many people you wanted, commit as much sin as you wanted, because if you were wealthy enough, you could just head on over to the church and with another little chest of gold for the bishop, and poof, absolution was yours. Well, this Martin Luther didn't react well to this, right?
No.
As a hardened, a fervent Catholic, he looked at that and said, "Yeah, I don't think that's." I might be misreading things. I might be misreading the Bible, okay, but I don't see that written anywhere in the Bible. I didn't see Jesus, taking bribes for like again Jesus didn't say to Lazarus, hey, now you owe me one. So in fact, Jesus, with the miracles of the loaves and the fishes and all this, he was completely unwavering and unfettered in his generosity, and because he was the Christ. And so there's nothing he would have denied anyone in need, anyone in suffering. That's why the Christ comes into the world. So he says, Benjamin says, thank you, sir, for explaining that. It's just that the church that I belong to forcibly asks for donations. Okay, so that's fine. That's fine, right? Okay, what people forcibly ask for, right? And of course, every church that I've gone to, I'm a Catholic, okay, they always pass the basket, right? The donation basket. And so they strongly encourage people to donate. And modern realities being as they are, and some of the modern expenses that churches go through, especially older churches. We have one here in Guelph that it's well over 150 years old, and they recently had to do a major renovation on the roof because there was like the water leaking in was, well, I mean, it was obvious, right? I mean, all the frescoes and everything on the ceiling were all being ruined. This is these are real practical problems, okay? And real practical problems require real practical solutions. Worldly problems often require worldly solutions. That's just the reality of the situation that we're in. So if you have a parish and you have parishioners and you are responsible for that parish as the monsignor or perhaps the bishop, and you're responsible for the upkeep of that parish, then yeah, you have to remind your parishioners, we're going to be investing, it's going to cost us over $250,000 or $500,000 to do the necessary repairs and the necessary restoration work on our magnificent 150-year-old cathedral here. So take that into consideration as you sit there and participate as a member of this parish. And ask yourself, do I need to do my part in the upkeep of this spiritual community? There's nothing wrong with that, Benjamin. That's a practical, real word. This is not what we're referring to. Okay, we are talking about people who are going online on the internet saying that I will give you a half an hour of spiritual counseling, right, for $50 an hour or $100 an hour. And you will get spiritual counseling from me. Do you see the difference? There's a big difference. It's an enormous difference, actually. Because if someone, and let's be clear, no one is sitting here trying to defend the Catholic Church or Christian churches or any of the. So for all of their crimes over the centuries, okay, but also recognize that even in their degenerated state, they do a great deal more for individuals at that level than, say, the atheists or the materialist scientists or the philosophers or any other or political groups. Because for individuals at a certain level who are very much asleep, those individuals seek and crave something to believe in. And look at what the alternatives are that the world gives them to believe in. Sports teams, actors, musicians, rock bands, or pop bands, television series, and political parties. Now, political parties ask for donations as well. Politicians ask for donations as well. What do politicians give the people in return? Other than a lot of false promises, right? And empty words. At least a parish. And we're not speaking about the church in Rome as a global entity now. We're just talking about your local parish. Because your local priest is not part of some grand global conspiracy to enslave you. No, they're not. They're not. They wholly and truly believe with all of their heart and all of their soul that they're doing God's work. And they do in the community, in their parish, do that work. So long as they don't become pedophiles. They do a tremendous amount of good. And the ministry that they serve for those parishioners, for those people at their level. For example, like when my mother was on her deathbed, and the priest came from the Hungarian church in Toronto, to come and perform the last rites. Right? And consoling someone who's on their deathbed and about to shuffle off this mortal coil. And how, of course, we were there, and it was our words, not the priest's words, which set my mother's mind at rest. But regardless, the priest came, the priest was there, and that is what gave us the pretext to be able to pray aloud with our mother, and the priest holding our hands in a little trinity, in a little triunity on her deathbed. And we prayed. We led the prayer, and that's when our mother looked us in the eye and said, I'm not afraid anymore. But how many people don't have a son or a daughter like that available to them? How many people face death not having prepared for it? Because they've feared it, they've avoided it, they've avoided the subject their entire life. And how valuable is it when someone can come in and help them prepare? There is, again, we're not trying to excuse the church in any way, shape, or form. We're just trying to express in practical terms what Jesus said to his disciples when he said, to you, the secrets have been given, but to them, meaning the others, the secrets have not been given. There have always been levels and levels and levels of teaching, levels and levels and levels of initiation. And the first lowest levels of initiation, the true kindergarten, is that publicly taught Christianity, that publicly taught Hinduism, the publicly taught Buddhism. And that is why we are here doing what we're doing, to help create a more of a trying to widen the access for the uninitiated masses to gain access to the inner teachings and to those essential inner teachings, which will allow them to transition from the broad public kindergarten level of spirituality and religion into those inner circles of the secrets, the esoteric wisdom, the esoteric knowledge required for awakening and self-realization of the being. And genuine awakening. And why we're doing, and why we speak out, and why we are so adamant in pointing out all of the trips, the tricks, the traps, the potholes, the pitfalls, and the landmines. If you want to use some different imagery, the spider webs, right? The traps, the Venus flytraps that have been set out for us by the Black Lodge. And all of those spiritual aspirants who have felt the longing to awaken, falling into the web of the Black Lodge, and falling into the web of the New Age, and wrapping themselves up, or taking their psychedelics over and over and over again, and just basically allowing the venom, putting the venom into their own veins to make themselves go numb and asleep, so they can dream and believe that they're awakening in the process. So they can dream themselves awake, that they can dream themselves awakening. Benjamin says, thank you for sharing your perspective, sir. I guess I'm not seeing the good side and just bitter about churches collecting so much money. No, so you're right. Okay, so let's look at, we mentioned Joel Osteen, okay? I mentioned Joel Osteen. Now, Joel Osteen lives in we don't quote us on the numbers here, but it's something like 26 million square foot mansion with a helicopter pad. Now, the last time we checked, Joel Osteen only conducts his ritual, his can we even call it mass? It's a service. It's a Christian service in his mega church in his that he built in wherever the hell he is, somewhere in the South in the United States. What does he need a helicopter for? What does anybody need 26 million square foot mansion for? Even if you were to say, well, he needed all that money to build that mega church, even if you were to say, okay, fine. Even if I were to grant you that a stadium costs a lot of money, okay, all right. But he is a multi millionaire, and clearly it's a vulgarity how he lives and what he does. It's a vulgarity. Does he bestow some benefit upon his congregation? Are there people who come to him who are lost and forlorn and have no hope and have no faith and are just completely just lost? Do they find some light and good and hope and faith in him or through him? Perhaps. But the reality is could those individuals find the faith and hope and light through him without him indulging that kind of lifestyle and without him taking the amount of money that he does? And what's more is that if he's able to accumulate all that much money and fame and a power and influence, what knowledge does he possess which he uses on his congregation, but which he does not inform his congregation of? In other words, black magic. So this is a common rationalization we hear from black magicians and chaos magicians and so on, who say, yeah, but I can perform miracles. I can heal people. I heal people. I do good things with my magic. And they don't realize that the so-called good things that they are doing are good from their ego point of view, and that point of view is precisely designed to encourage them to continue to break the great law, to continue to violate, and to continue to abuse and misuse their sexual force, and continually throw a monkey wrench in the workings of the great law of karma. Oh, but I'm doing good things. That person was sick, I made them better. Yeah, but that person was supposed to be sick. The person's illness was karmic. And you came along and that person was supposed to go through that illness and come out on the other side and was supposed to learn something from the experience. You came along and you robbed them of that learning experience. You told yourself that it was good, that you were doing a good thing. But that's the problem with black magic. That's the problem with people who are awakening negatively. They're awakening inside of their ego, which means even though in their heart they still have the longing to do good, but it's filtered through their ego. It's what their ego says is good. what their ego tricks them into believing is good, so that they can continue on believing that they are good, that they have this power, this magic, and they're using it for the benefit of others. And we've talked about this in past live streams. That's why whenever a Gnostic prays or does any kind of magic or any kind of visualization of healing or prays, does the any type of ceremony or ritual or rite, whether it's healing, whether of any type whatsoever, we always end our petitions with, may all this be done in accordance with the law. May all this be done in accordance with the law. It is our recognition and admission and invocation that regardless of how elaborate this ritual was, regardless of how impassioned this petition was, regardless of how much energy and vitality and willpower we channeled into our prayer and into our begging and with humility, our prayer, that our prayer be answered, we say, but may all this be done in accordance with the law. So that regardless of the time, the effort, the energy, and everything that we put into it, we know that the great law shall veto it if that's the way things need to go. That all of our time and energy and effort and everything is only in support of the Logos, the great law, the universe, unfolding as it needs to, intelligently managing and balancing out the forces and energies so that people can evolve, souls can evolve in accordance with their own karma and their own path and their own journey. So that no matter how well-intentioned our magic is, we always make it subservient, always give it a back seat to the great law of karma. Well, black magicians don't do this. They would never do this. It's actually the reverse. They believe that it's their God-given right and it's their God-given duty to act against the fates that they call them, right? To act against destiny, because they will tell you that destiny is a slavery, that fate is slavery, and that karma is slavery. So I'm going to be in charge of my own life, and I create my future, right? And you hear this all the time. I create my reality. You hear this all the time in the New Age. We have the power to create our own reality, and we are creating our own reality all the time. So why not create the reality that we want? Why not create the reality that I want or that you want? Create the reality that you want. This is how they sell you, right? This is their sales pitch. So Mugaboo22 says, so you don't recommend microdosing mushrooms or LSD or THC? No, we do not. You do you. You do you. We don't recommend any substances whatsoever. You don't need them. You don't need them. And if you've taken them and they brought you this far, you especially don't need them anymore. You may have needed them at some point because you were an atheist and you needed to be shown something beyond your physical capacity. But now you've seen that, you've had those experiences. Now you should be seeking those experiences minus the mushrooms. Now, why is that? Well, a few moments ago, we talked about dreaming being awake. Now, if you dream that you are awake, Are you awake or are you dreaming? If you dream that you're awake, are you awake or are you sleeping?
Sleeping.
You're asleep,
Yes.
right? Because you're dreaming. It doesn't matter that you're dreaming that you're awake. It doesn't matter. You're not awake. And that's all that any substance can do, is make you dream that you're awake. It can't awaken you. It cannot. Because number one, it's not the substance that's affecting you to begin with. It is the elemental of the plant, of the substance. It is the elemental that is affecting you. It's not the physical thing, for starters, right? Because the brain is not the source of your consciousness, and the brain is not the source of the mind. And if you are having a out-of-body experience, your brain isn't even there anymore. It's not the substance that's affecting you. Nonetheless, you are subjecting yourself to an outside influence. And that outside influence is causing you to have these experiences. You're not having these experiences. You are being taken on a trip. That is why they're called trips. Whereas if you travel in the astral plane, if you astral project, if you astral travel, it's called traveling. You travel. You're not taken on a trip. You're not tripping out. You're traveling. You can make decisions. You can make choices. You're actually awakening on that level, on the fifth dimension. Now, if you take a trip and you're being taken on a trip, you're not traveling in the solar astral plane. You're traveling in the lunar astral plane. You're traveling in hell. The people often hear me say that, say, how can you say that when I had this beautiful experience and that beautiful experience and all its beauty and all this wonderness? And we have to, stop them right there and say, remember the passage from the Bible that says, wide is the gate and easy is the way into hell, and there are many who take it, but narrow is the gate and difficult is the way into heaven, and there are few who take it. Hell has no walls. It has no fences. It has no bars, no locks, no guards, no guard towers. People are clamoring to get inside hell. They're hurting themselves down the wide, towards the wide gate. They're clamoring, they're stampeding down the easy path towards the wide gate. Look around you, look around the world. To end up in hell means just to roll down a hill. It takes zero effort to get there. Why is that? Look at your own experience. Look at who goes onto a pornography website, okay, and it has an experience doing whatever it is they're doing on that pornography website. Who there feels like they're in hell? Or when you're watching anything on mainstream television, or if you're eating fast food, or any of the prepared processed foods, the junk foods, the endless candy and the sugar and the chocolate and the potato chips and all that stuff, and the soda pops and on and on and on. Like when you're drinking a sugary beverage, do you feel that you're in hell? No. All of these substances, all of these experiences, all of this stimulation, all of these entertainments, they all make you feel pleasure. But you're in hell. But you willingly give yourself to it. You willingly give yourself to temptation. You willingly give in to your pleasure. Willingly. That's hell. When something is luring you, like the Pied Piper, luring all the children away by playing his flute, and all the children da 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 da. Right? It's easy. Look at the mainstream media. Look at advertising. Look at corporations. Look at the false gurus. The false gurus, like the Eckhart Tolles and the Deepak Chopras and even the Joel Osteens of this world. How can they dupe all of those millions and millions and millions of people, if not by giving the people what they want, by telling them what they want to hear? That's the Pied Piper, leading people down the easy path in through the wide gate. That's hell. That's the way to hell. It's easy. It takes zero effort, none. It's called gravity. It's inevitable, right? Narrow is the gate, and difficult is the way. Yeah, and Benjamin says also mindlessly scrolling through Facebook. It seems like a mind control in plain sight, but the mind control is in here. Observe yourself. You need no mainstream media. You don't need any mainstream media. You don't need any politicians. You don't need any conspiracy theories. You don't need Bill Gates. You don't need any entity inside of you. All it takes is you versus you, your own desires. Okay, you cannot tell me that if you're walking through the woods and you come across a beautiful woman, right, or a beautiful apple tree, and it's filled with glorious, juicy, ripe apples, but it's on somebody else's property, right? And you've been hiking for hours and you're out of water. And boy, oh boy, would one of those juicy apples really hit the spot right now. Right? You don't need any corporations. You don't need anybody outside influences. All you need is the temptation. And all of a sudden, your mind will kick in and your body will kick in. Your mouth will start watering, thinking about biting into one of those big, juicy, ripe apples. And look, there's 1,000 of them on that tree. That person isn't going to miss one. Now that's a very innocuous example. Nobody's going to hell for plucking an apple off a tree. We're not talking about the apple from the book of Genesis here. But you see what we mean by this is that we don't have to blame the world and society. The world is the way it is because we are the way we are. The world is a reflection and a projection of the psychology, the psyche of humanity. That's how asleep we are. The world is only able to mesmerize and hypnotize humanity. The world is not mesmerizing and hypnotizing humanity. The world is just simply reflecting and taking advantage of the fact that humanity is already mesmerized and hypnotized from within. We do that to ourselves all the time. All you have to do is put yourself into a kind of solitary confinement. And we've all done this. We've all had to do it. We've been forced to do it by the COVIDiocy, by the so-called global plague. And how many times have we found ourselves essentially under house arrest? And maybe the internet went out, or the cable went down, or there's nothing good on TV, and we found ourselves sitting alone in our room, in our apartment, or in our house, and nothing to do, nothing to read, nothing to watch. All we had were sitting alone with our thoughts. And if you observe your thoughts for any length of time, you know that there are adulterers, pornographers, murderers, thieves, billionaire, billionaire industrialists. Anything and everything out there in the world is in here. All you have to do is observe yourself for any length of time, objectively and without judgment. And the voices in your head will pop up, do this, do that. Or you fantasize, you just watch your mind as it goes off, fantasizing about this, that, and the other thing. Just observe it. And you realize that's the reason why there's so much mind control in the world, because we're already hypnotized. We're all asleep. We're already asleep. When someone's asleep, it's easy to lure them around by their nose. They're asleep. This is the great tragedy of humanity, and why this word awaken has been co-opted, misused, and abused. Because the Black Lodge wants to keep humanity asleep. It doesn't want them to awaken, or it wants them to awaken negatively. It wants them to awaken as demons. It wants more foot soldiers. It wants to add to its arsenal of awakened demons. So, but again, a few moments ago, we were talking about this dreaming that we are awake. So let's talk about dreams for a moment. Because this astral plane stuff, it's starting to get out of hand from the perspective of what people keep saying about, people keep talking about 5D ascension. And they really don't have a clue as to what they're talking about, because they're using, again, if awaken has been co-opted and misused, the word ascension has likewise been co-opted, misappropriated, and is being misused and abused. Ascension refers to something very, very, very specific. And we do not ascend into the fifth dimension. You do not, when you go to sleep at night, and you leave your body and you go into the astral plane, you are not ascending into the astral plane. For starters, because you're dreaming, you're actually descending into the lunar astral plane. But again, they don't talk about that. They don't know anything about that. They don't want to know anything about that. Because anytime you try to illuminate them on the facts, they just plug their ears and go, la, 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 I can't hear you, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. Because you're not telling them what they want to hear. They already have dozens and dozens and dozens of New Age books and New Age gurus that tell them what they want to hear. So they're not going to listen to you. Try to speak the truth. So when we dream, our experience in the astral plane reflects our experience in the waking plane. So if we do not have lucid dreams, if we cannot travel in the astral plane, that means we're asleep. We just have dreams, we're asleep, right? Well, yes and no. And the reason why we say yes and no is because in order for you to have experiences in the astral plane, in order for you to be able to travel in the astral plane, it's not simply a matter of, saying mantras and doing practices and being able to lucid dream. You must have the prerequisites in order to be able to travel in the astral plane, which means you must have an astral body. And either you developed it in this lifetime or a previous lifetime, but you have it, a solar astral body. To travel in the solar astral plane, you need a solar astral body. in whatever stage of development that it is. And there have been cases of individuals who were given access to their solar astral body by their own divine mother, and they began to, for lack of a better word or lack of a better expression, take it for granted, on the borderline of abusing it. So the Gnostic instructor gives an example of an individual who was a member of the Gnostic school, and he could very easily astral project.
Mm.
And the other students were always in awe of his stories, his tales of his exploits in the astral plane. And then they would come to him with requests. Oh, can you look into this for me? Can you go to the Akashic records and find this out for me? Or can you spy on this person? Or can you do this? And can you find out if my girlfriend is cheating on me? Or all this kind of stuff. And he would basically, again, for lack of a better expression, take he would write himself like a laundry list, a shopping list of requests. He would take requests, and he would go, and then the next week he would come back to the school, and he would say, "Oh yes, I looked into it. Yes, your girlfriend is definitely having an affair. Oh yes, I went to the Akashic records. This is what you were looking for." And and he would go, and he would fulfill everybody's requests, and people flaunted over this fellow, and he was the most popular guy in the school, in the Gnostic Center. And then one day, his innermost being and his divine mother said, "Okay, enough is enough. You're cut off." And his astral body was taken away from him. And he could no longer project into the astral plane. No matter what he did, no matter what he tried, no matter what technique, he could not project into the astral plane anymore. He was cut off. His solar astral body was taken away from him. Why? Well, hopefully for obvious reasons. Because the solar astral body, the projecting into the astral plane, that's not what it's for. To pump up our self-esteem and to make ourselves look good for our friends and to become popular and to do all of these things like spy on other people and stuff. That's not what astral projection is for. For committing crimes, and for committing and for showing off, and for building up our mystic pride. Let's take a pause for a moment because looks like we have a serious comment here. I am trying my best to warn my brother about taking coke and coming up with so many far-fetched realizations, insights that seem so great to him. And then he continues here. I tell him that no matter the realizations, it is always better when you have them when sober. But he explains how he feels connected to nature, to trees, in an indescribable manner. Aha, okay. You have him. Okay. This is, remember, one of our assignments, okay, is to talk about the tricks and the traps. Nature is a trap. Psychedelics and substances are a trap. We just spent a whole lot of time talking about the wide gate and the easy path. We just talked about how hell, the road to hell, feels good. It's lined with pleasure. It's lined with good intentions, right? That's where advertising comes from. Satan invented advertising. It's in the book of Genesis. The serpent who tempts Eve and says, hey, you're not going to die if you have the apple. You're going to be just like the gods. You know? And he said, oh, you got a hubby, you got Adam. Don't worry, we have a 2-for-1 deal. Like it's the serpent in the Garden of Eden invented that. Like that, the hustle, the sales pitch, advertising, marketing. That's Satan's work. That's what it is. Tell the people what they want to hear. Give the people what they want. Because it's so self-evident. If you were to design a prison, and remember, nature operates under something known as the conservation of energy, which means nature doesn't do anything in a way that doesn't utilize energy in the maximum possible way. So mechanical nature is very, very, very efficient. It doesn't go about look at the predators. Look at the lions on the Serengeti or cats in general. They sleep 20 hours a day. they don't expend any superfluous energy, right? Right? And just think about cats who can be pretty dickish. They're only dickish 4 hours of the day. The rest of the time they're sleeping. so think about how if you were to design a prison and you wanted to make it as efficient as possible, if you wanted to enslave people, wouldn't you make it so that they were clamoring hand over fist, clawing over each other to get inside of your prison, to get inside of your your place of enslavement? Of course you would. Because that's the challenge, that's the test. Because to climb the mountain takes effort. To achieve something, to become something, to evolve, to become an Olympic athlete takes years of sacrifice and dedication and hard work. To become a master at anything, to become a master mountaineer, to become a master blacksmith, potter, basket weaver, tailor, designer, I don't care what it is that you do. To become a master at it, you have to devote your life to it. Devote your life to it. To climbing that upward battle, that upward climb. That's where true value lies. But all around us are the temptations, including nature. Because we have this meme that we have shared. We've shared this many times, but we'll share it again because it's give us a moment to pull it up here. It truthfully cannot be shared often enough because and Mugaboo here is speaking of his brother.
I was reminded basically on the clip with George Calling on advertising. That one's kind of great as well in
Which
relation
clip?
to this.
Which clip of who?
George Calling.
Or George Cullen?
Yeah. He speaks about advertising basically, and basically makes up a commercial and how they are rambling on and on about the benefits of their services.
Okay. George Carlin.
Yes.
Yeah, you know that George Carlin's mother was a Madison Avenue advertising executive.
Yeah.
So his knowledge of that industry was he had all the inside stuff because he got all that from his mother, and he had the voice, and he had the Yeah, I know that piece of material that you're referring to.
Yeah.
He basically has all these buzzwords and phrases, and
Yeah.
he strings them all into a commercial that's like the ultimate commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He was a brilliant genius commentator on modern life. So let's very quickly. I want to share this just to let's see if we can make it as big as we can make it here. No, that doesn't help. Okay, so you can see Mugaboo. What we're talking about here is mechanical nature is like the undercurrents that hold water to the earth. And as you know, that the undertow, the undercurrents, take surface water and takes it down to the bottom, and then has that undercurrent flow. But you also know that the sun is beating down on that water, that it's trying to coax water molecules to free themselves from the limitations of their existence as physical water. We call that process evaporation. And then they can ascend up into the heavens, and they form those beautiful clouds. But they're free. They're part of the air. They're not bound to the earth anymore. And in between liquid water and water vapor, there's a very, very, very thin skin of water molecules that we call surface tension. And that's the tension between what is pulling, the forces pulling the water molecules to remain bound to their liquid form, bound to the earth, and the forces which are calling them to liberate themselves and be free from the earth and to rise up into the heavens and to join their brothers and sisters in the clouds. This is the difference between our divine and our mechanical natures. And substances, as your brother is expressing to you, will come up with a million different tricks to keep us bound to the earth. And so that feeling of connection to nature, okay, all substances create that, including marijuana, especially marijuana. And because all those those tree hugging, earth loving hippies, who they believe in permaculture, and they want to live in communes out in the wilderness, out in the woods, and they all they smoke their pot and they do their nature rituals, and they're all believe in shamanism, and they want to do their mushrooms, and they want to worship Mother Earth. They want to worship Gaia. They want to worship nature. That's called idolatry. That's called nature idolatry, nature worship. And in fact, all of the Aboriginal peoples from around the world are all stuck at that level in spirituality, because they all were at one point at a higher level of spirituality, but they devolved down, we're back into nature worship. This is an aspect of devolution. And part of what gets expressed during that process of devolution is human beings start to become more primal and more savage. So they stop listening to real music. They start listening to music which is just the beating of the drum, boom, 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 boom. They stop real dancing with a partner, and they replace it with jumping up and down to the sound of the beat. and it's boom, 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 boom. And what else do? They start scarring and permanently marking their bodies with tattoos. They start doing excessive piercing. They start doing crazed and hairdos and hairstyles and hair colors and all sorts of things. And you look at what's happening in the West, and you look at the rise of popularity of tattoos and piercings and scarring and all this kind of stuff. What you're witnessing is the devolution of a humanity before your eyes. Because all you need to do is look at the Aboriginal communities from around the world. You go to Africa, right? You go to the Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert or whatever, and what you will see is guys, men who have giant discs in their lips and in their ears and multiple piercings in different parts of their body and tattoos and scarring. And what do? They have a drum, they beat the drum, and they jump up and down to the beat of the drum. And whoever can jump the highest among the Bushmen of the Kalahari is the alpha male. That's how they show their superiority to the women in the tribe. Who can jump the highest? Now, when we want to talk about awakening, becoming enlightened, achieving great heights as a human being, do you see how achieving great heights as a human being, as a concept, as a philosophy, as a sociological, spiritual striving for greatness, striving to reach the heavens, how jumping up and down to the beat of a drum in order to achieve alpha status in the tribe is a devolved, degenerated version of that? It's self-evident. It's self-evident. But we've been on this track for some time, beginning with, you look at the cover of men's magazines, right? Or women's magazines, and you look at, to be a man, right? You have to have this physique. You have to have the washboard abs and this physique and this and that, right? That's already a devolution. That's already a degeneration to that physical level. Or you need to be on the cover of Forbes magazine, and it's the number next to your name that matters, right? Again, it's a material, quantitative thing, right? Who tops the 100 most wealthy men in America list? They get their choice of the alpha females. It's not a far cry from that to the Bushmen of Kalahari, who are jumping up and down to see who's the alpha, to see who jumps the highest, to see who has his pick over the women in the tribe. And again, why would you want that? Why would you want to have first pick of the females of your tribe? Well, because then you get to pick the alpha females. Then you have the strongest likelihood of having the strongest children, right? Of reproduction. It's exactly the same thing that wolves do in their pack and that lions do in their pride, and that bulls and other equine animals do when they butting heads, rams and deer, bucks, bison, when they're slamming into each other. Why are they doing that? For mating rights, for the position of alpha male. These are primal, animal, savage behaviors. Savage. Primal, animal, natural, mechanical nature. So when your brother describes how taking drugs connects him to nature and trees in an undescribable manner, you have him. You have to be able to show him this. You have to be able to explain to him the difference between mechanical and divine nature, and that it's not, and that connecting to nature, even on the level of the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension, it's a trap. It's a trap, because we are not awake. We are not true human beings. We are not enlightened. We are not awake until we awaken in the sixth dimension. Sixth dimension. Now, Benjamin says cats are very cute too. Oh, that's that's conservation of energy, an efficient way of enslaving their humans. Cats are actually very magical creatures. They're not devolving creatures, not like dogs. But cats are. We've talked about this before. There's a Turkish documentary called Kedi. Kedi is the Turkish word for cat, and in that in that documentary, they speak with a Sufi, and he says, to Sufis, cats are aware of the existence of God. The difference between cats and dogs is that dogs believe that their owner is God. Dogs live their life worshiping their owners. You see, cats know better. Cats are aware of God. That's why cats don't worship human beings. And that's why people believe that Egyptians worshipped cats, because cats were aware of God. They're magical beings, they're magical creatures. In other words, cats have no attachment to you. Not like dogs. The reason why we call dogs man's best friend is because dogs develop an attachment to the point where if their owner dies, the dog will die. It's a very common thing. It's in many ways it was true for our dog. He was 16 years old, so he's already pushing it, but 6 months, almost to the day, 6 months after my mom passed away, my dog passed away. 6 months later, he couldn't go on without her. But for some people, it's even, and then there's stories like the story of Hajiko, who for 2 years he waited at the train station for his owner before he finally died. His owner went to work and had a heart attack and died, but Hajiko would always wait for his owner at the train station. And one day his owner didn't come home, and Hajiko didn't leave the train station. He stayed at the train station. And Richard Gere made a movie about this called Haji. Is it Haji or Hajiko? And it's of course a very sentimental story, right? And in Japan, they erected a bronze statue of Hajiko at that station in tribute to this dog that wouldn't leave because he was. But you see, we have this because we're sentimental beings, human beings, and we want to believe that Hachiko was out of loyalty and out of devotion and out of love. Yeah, that's it, Benjamin. Yeah, it's Hachi, a dog's tail. That's why we knew that it was. Yeah, we want to believe that it was Hachi's love for his owner, and yes, there's some of that, but mostly it's attachment. You would never see a cat behaving that way, and people who don't like cats will say that. They'll say, you see, you'll never see a cat You'll never see a cat dying for his owner. No, you won't. You honestly, you won't. But that's up to you to decide what's is if the cat is cats who are more aloof, who are more indifferent. You have to decide if that's a sign of cold-heartedness, or if it's actually a sign of wisdom, that they're not attached. They're not attached to this impermanent mortal human, right? They're only attached to what will feed them. In Hungarian, we have an expression that says dogs are attached to their owners, or sorry, dogs bond with their owners, cats bond with the household. Right? A warm house, roof over their head, and food in their belly. That's what a cat bonds with. And perhaps maybe a warm bed or a nice windowsill or a nice cardboard box.
Yeah. So cats basically have a connection with their host sometimes, but not being attached to the host. Because once when I lived with my ex-girlfriend, I bonded in quite closely to her cat, and when later I moved back home again, the cat ran away and never came back. So that cat basically went out and started to look for me. Uh, but
Started to look for
never
you,
came
or
back.
started to look for
Yeah,
somebody else?
yeah,
When the cat realized that the cat can have that they can have relationships which are more profound than the
yeah,
relationship that it had with your girlfriend.
yes,
Because the thing about cats is cats are the easiest animal to experience human to animal communication with,
yeah,
telepathy. The cats are the easiest. Cats can read your mind already. It's
yeah,
fairly certain, but they're the easiest to have a animal communication with, and especially black cats. The black cats are the most magical. That's why you have that thing about black cats associated with witches and magicians and sorcerers, because the coloration of a cat is it's related to that cat's level of being, that cat's karma. And black cats are the most magical. They're the one, and they can help you. A cat is a tremendous companion on the path. And that's why so many mystics and so many esotericists have owned cats, and many of them have written about cats, and not just like many of them written poetry and whatnot about cats. And again, you go back to Egypt, and the Egyptian pharaohs would mummify their cats, right? So there's something special and magical there, and it is related again to this matter of awakening. Versus, yes, of course, it's all wonderful. And listen, I love dogs too. I love dogs. I think there's just something so joyous about having a dog who puts all of his life and attention and energy, gives it all to you unconditionally. Right? There's something endearing about that, and there are, of course, many examples of dogs who have risked their lives or given their lives to save human beings. So they might be a devolving species, but they are not without their merits. They're not without their own type of magic. It's a different type of thing. They might be lower on the in the overall scheme of things than, let's say, a cat, but they serve their purpose and they serve human beings quite well in that role. And all you have to do is go to a hospital or children's ward where people come in with therapy dogs. If you know what a therapy dog is, you know that they can do incredible good just by loving, just by having that loving attention, because a therapy dog doesn't become attached to the person that they love everybody. That's what makes them a great therapy dog. They love everyone. They're every person they see is just an opportunity to lick another face. Right? And they want that warmth and companionship, and they want that. So maybe that's a sign of just, an animal that just, caught in attachment and mechanicity or whatever. However, from our perspective, what we see is in dogs a devolving species that has countless opportunities to serve and sacrifice through their relationship with human beings. And all of those monads inside of those dogs have an opportunity, through giving a life of service and sacrifice to humans and giving that unconditional love, and all of they are, right, to increase their level of being, despite the fact that they are living a life in a devolving species. It's an opportunity for redemption. And anyway, we're a little bit off topic. Let's get back on topic, and by talking about the astral plane and awakening in the astral. Now, we preface this by saying that we preface this with that story of the individual who had the ability to project into the astral plane, and it was taken away from him. Now, in that case, it was taken away from him because he was abusing that power. In our case, it was taken away from us because we accomplished what we needed to. We did what we needed to do in the astral plane. And so we needed to focus our time and attention and focus our practices on learning how to subdue and live with our entity. And we weren't going to accomplish that on the astral plane. In fact, on several different occasions, we write about this in our article on fear, and we will write about it. We're going to be including that in our book. We were attacked by the demon in the astral plane on more than one occasion, and it was too easy for him to ambush us. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, we're in that situation where it doesn't matter what we do. Right? We can't project into the astral plane anymore. And it won't be until we won't be allowed to return until it's necessary for us to return. And then we'll be able to return. Our Divine Mother will give my solar astral body back to me. Mm. But for now, having said that, if you have not done certain things in the astral plane, or if you have not ever projected the astral plane, or you have not tried to project into the astral plane, that is one of the core practices on the path. Now, the reason why we start this discussion by saying it is possible to have your solar astral body taken away from you, to make it clear that it is good to find out if you can project into the astral plane. It is good to do so a number of times. Ask to see yourself as you truly are. Ask to see your innermost being. Ask to see your divine mother. Meditate. Ask to visit the Akashic records or go to the Lost Library of Atlantis. Visit a temple of the Great White Lodge. Ask to see an archangel or a master. Use the opportunity, the availability. Use the fifth dimension. It's there. And if you can, use the different techniques that are available to you to awaken in the astral plane. Now, one thing to remember is that being awake on the astral plane doesn't mean that you're awake. But what it does mean is that you are awakening to a degree. You have some level of awakening. The other thing is that you have some conservation and transmutation of energy. Because without some semblance of free consciousness and without some semblance of harnessed energy, you can't project into the astral plane. Because it takes energy to travel in the fifth dimension. And the energy that's required to travel in the fifth dimension is not physical energy, it's prana, and it's transmuted prana. If you are wasting your sexual force, and if you are doubling down on your ego or whatever, and if you're doing the practices, if you are awakening negatively, you can travel in the lunar astral plane, potentially. And that's important. That's why the distinction between the two is so important. And it's important to be able to know which astral plane you are traveling in. And you can find that out particularly as you when you encounter other beings on the astral plane, particularly when you encounter beings claiming to be superior, archangels and masters and so on and so forth. Now, why is that important? It is important to know, if you are in the lunar and solar astral plane, it is important to know if the being you are speaking to is who and what they truly say they are. Well, how can you know that? You know that by asking them a question. The question you ask them is to instruct you, show great respect, show great humility. But if you are approached by some angel or master or some entity in the astral plane, you are approached and they start telling you things that you want to hear, things that make you feel whatever. They say, oh, we want you to channel my teachings and I want you to be my messenger and blah, 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 and this and that. And they'll appear to you as some kind of resplendent angel or whatever. Just ask them, show great respect, show great humility, and say, I thank you for this great honor. But please, before I accept this great honor, would you please do me the service of instructing me on the correct practice of Tantra? Should I or should I not indulge in the orgasm? Simple. A member of the Black Lodge cannot answer that question falsely. And a member of the White Lodge cannot lie. So if this resplendent being tells you, oh, yes, of course, you want to harness the power of the orgasm, you want to harness the power of, you want to fornicate, you want to masturbate, do all these things that they make you stronger or whatever, right? Then you know you're dealing with a black magician or a demon in disguise. You see, no one tells you these things. Why don't they? Why don't other people who talk about projecting in the astral plane tell you the most fundamental and important things you need to be able to know? There's the war for the souls of humanity is not limited to the three-dimensional world by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's a war, it's an esoteric war. It's a war for hearts and minds. Well, the war for the hearts and minds means it's a war that takes place on the astral plane. Even when we're here and now, when you turn on the news, World War III is already on. World War III is for the hearts and minds of this humanity. The television doesn't shoot any bullets at you. Television is not at risk of blowing up. The television is not going to unleash anthrax in your living room. No. So then, where is the battlefield that weapon of mass destruction, that weapon of mass distraction is operating on? If not, your mind. And the heart-mind is the fifth dimension, the fifth and sixth sephir on the tree of life. That is the fifth dimension that we call the astral plane. So you need to be able to protect yourself. You need to go in with your eyes open. It's not enough. Yes, you have some awakened consciousness. Yes, you've done some practices. Okay, you have a lucid dream. Now I'm in the astral plane. Woo, now I can go play. No. Don't have that attitude. Of course, you're going to feel elated. You're going to have some excitement, some enthusiasm. Okay. All right. Go and fly up into the atmosphere, fly around the earth, put this flat earth thing to bed once and for all, right? But then use that opportunity for something important, right? Use that opportunity for your progress, for your progression, for your awakening. There are, we've mentioned many times, and on Glorianne, we've talked about this course many times. It's called Defense for Spiritual Warfare. And in our core practices, we gave some of the prayers of protection. This is a valuable course. If you plan on spending time in the astral plane, this is a useful course to study. But let's talk about some practical things that we can do. Because all of this talk of the astral plane is fine, but you have to get there. And there are a number of different mantras and a number of different techniques that we can incorporate into our practices. Now, full disclosure, in our day, in our experience, we tried all of these. there's really only two which worked for us. So we're going to just go over these. There's the link that we're going to provide to this page. We're going to go over the mantras and whatnot in a very rudimentary way. And we provided you with the link so that you can come and do this research on your own. And you can, but the real research that you need to do is you need to try these for yourself. See what works for you. Feel into it. See what feels right, what draws you into it. And remember that you're not going to get it on the first try. This is something that you have to work with for an extended period of time. And don't go back and forth and back and forth. Like any mantra, don't say like, well, today I'm going to try that mantra. Oh, it didn't work. 5 minutes later, you're doing a different mantra. And 5 minutes later, you're doing another technique because, oh, well, this didn't work. 5 minutes is not enough time. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. We have to have infinite patience. We have to relax and really, really have no expectations. This is a process which, again, patience, relaxation, concentration, visualization where appropriate. Some of the techniques that people have used that don't come from this tradition are simply related to visualization. And there are so many techniques that people have. People have invented their own techniques to be able to have what they call lucid dreams. So there are people who are atheists, really, and they have their lucid dreams, and they invented their own technique for doing so, because they certainly didn't get their technique from glorian.org if they're atheist. So the first one here is the mantra Fa Ra On. And there's a recording here on how to pronounce it. It's pretty straightforward. The spelling, the phonetic spelling here explains how to do it. Now, they also talk about doing the macrocosmic star before you lie down. Faraon is one of these mantras that you want to do while you are lying in bed, and you put your feet, you bend your knees, and you put the soles of your feet flat on the bed, and you put your palms flat on the bed to your side. Before you do lie down, you want to perform the macrocosmic star. We've shown this to you before. It's described here in detail on how to perform it. The next mantra is Tai Re 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 Re. And you want to do the syllable Tai in a lower octave or a lower note or a lower tone, and then the Re in a higher tone. Also, you don't want to roll the R. This is one of the rare cases where you don't roll the R in the mantra. And the Re is E as in red. It's not A as in way, right? So it's not Ray, Ray, Ray. It's Re, Re, Re. There's a pronunciation here. It's pretty sketchy. So anyway, now Master Samael talks here about the possibility of awakening spontaneously, what he calls the unforeseen and reflex astral projection. He shares here a story about a man who was sleeping and he was dreaming that somebody was at his door, was knocking his door. So he jumped out of bed and he went to the door and he answered the door. And when he went back, to his room, he was surprised because there was somebody sleeping in his bed. And on closer observation, he looked and he discovered that's not somebody sleeping in my bed. That's my body sleeping in my bed. And that's when he realized that he was outside of his body, and he realized he was lucid dreaming. He had projected into the astral plane spontaneously by suddenly and deliberately getting up out of his bed while he was still dreaming. And so he left his body in the bed, and he left the bed. It's an interesting little anecdote. The next one, this is called the anahat sound. We talked about this before. That's what people call tinnitus, or the ringing in the ears. That sound emanates from the pineal gland, and it is the still soft voice, or the chirping cricket of the innermost being. If you meditate on the anahat sound, there's a specific way that we practice this, and it's maybe the best way to do it is to just read what's read here. So you want to meditate on the sound, and when the mind is quiet, in profound silence, the student can then inevitably perceive the sound of the cricket, a subtle, sharp, penetrating sound. Moreover, if the sound of the student is absorbed within such a mystical sound, then the doors of mystery open up for him. Consequently, in those moments, he can rise from the bed instinctively and leave the room. He can go towards the temples of the White Lodge or to any place in the universe. The disciple must learn how to play the lyre of Orpheus. This lyre is the word, the sound, the great word. We were talking about the power of sound and the power of mantra. There is a sound emanating from the Absolute, and it is the sound of creation, it is the sound of the Christ, and that sound is within us. It's called that ringing in our ears, that tinnitus, the anahat sound. If you meditate on that sound, eventually what will emerge from that sound is what will quite literally sound like a cricket to you. When that happens, roll onto your right side, put your right hand under your head, under the pillow, and put your left hand on your left thigh with your legs stacked on top of each other. Okay, so you basically roll over onto your right-hand side into what's known as the lion's pose. Right arm under your head, left arm on your left thigh, and legs side by side on top of each other. Whoops. This is the position that the Buddha assumed when he disincarnated, when he ascended into the supernal worlds. He assumed so when you see in Asia, you see those statues of the reclining Buddha, he's in the lion's pose. That's what they call the lion's pose. This was one of the two methods that worked for us. Now, having said that, we should warn you that it was also one of the times that we were attacked, because as we were projecting into the astral plane, it's kind of hard to describe that feeling, but we were passing through what's like a hazy, cloudy, kind of misty, dark, misty sort of transitional phase. In that moment, something grabbed us, and we could feel ourselves being carried, and we were completely paralyzed, like what people experience as sleep paralysis. So we were awake, but we were paralyzed, but we were being carried, we were being taken. and but everything all around us was just this dark, hazy, like misty darkness, like milky darkness that we were in. And with all of our willpower, we could turn to see what was happening, and we were being carried away by a demon, and we were under its arm, and it was flying, and we saw its face very distinctly, and it was just like so many gargoyles that you see on the outside of cathedrals. We found a picture for our article on fear. We found a picture that very much captured what our experience was like, what he looked like. Anyway, yeah, here. Let's see if we can get a bigger version of it. There. That's what attacked us. That's what intercepted us or ambushed us just as we were projecting into the astral plane. And it was that same kind of misty, milky, dark. It was more black than blue, but I mean, this is a piece of artwork. But this creature that you see here in this piece of artwork, this is what was carrying us under its arm. And suffice it to say, we had to find a way to break free, because we don't know where we were being taken to. We don't know what would have happened to us had we just gone along with it. But we knew we couldn't let that happen. The next, okay, so then there's the mantra S. Pretty straightforward. There's the mantra La Ra, or Ra La. That's also described in great detail. Now the next one is it's called discernment, or the special clue of discernment, Master Samael says. Now this is a little bit, this is a a practice which is more associated with being awake than, using mantras and, whatever techniques. Like the Anahat sound meditation, discernment is an expansion of awareness, expansion of consciousness, and knowing where we are. So the practice, believe it or not, to being able to awaken in the astral plane, the practice is to awaken here and now in the physical plane. To know where we are at all times. Practically speaking, Master Samael called this the key of SOL, subject, object, location. Subject, okay, who am I? Right, where am I? Object, what am I looking at? Right, so subject is who am I, object is where am I, and location, let's try this one more time. Subject is who am I, object is what am I looking at, and location is where am I. So who am I? You check in with yourself. What is it that grabbed your attention? What is it that piqued your curiosity? Could be a color, it could be a landscape, could be a sunrise, could be a bird on a tree. It doesn't matter what it is. Just whenever your attention is grabbed by something, your curiosity is piqued by something, you want to focus in on that and say, okay, who am I? What is it that grabbed my attention? Do you want to remember yourself? You want to remember your divine mother? Whatever that caused you to pay attention to this object. Now, check in with the object. What is it? What is it about it that grabbed your attention? And then you say, okay, now am I in my astral body? Am I in the astral plane? Am I dreaming this, in other words? Is this just a dream? Or is this for real? And how can I find out? I know. I'm going to jump. I'm going to make a little jump into the air with the intention of flying, with the intention of floating. I'm going to jump into the air and do so if you can. You can't always do this because you're in a crowded place or in a public place. You know, you can't just in the middle of the grocery store while you're looking at cheese. You can't jump up in the, you know, you're not going to do that.
No, you can also try to move like objects with your mind. That's also a good practice to do, actually, because that's more discreet.
You know what? If nothing else, you can try to stretch out your finger.
Yeah.
Pull your finger to see if it stretches like rubber. Or you can take your hand and see if you can put it through a solid object.
Yeah.
So if you're on a bus or if you're on a plane, you're in a taxi or in an Uber, take your hand and try to put it through the back seat. In other words, break the laws of physics. If you can break the laws of physics, you know you're in the astral plane. Boom. If you jump up and you're floating, you're in the astral plane. If you can put your hand through the car seat, you're in the astral plane. If you can move, if you're in the grocery store and you want to check if you're in the astral plane, you see some peculiar piece of cheese, and that's a peculiar piece of cheese. Am I in the astral plane? Try to pick up the piece of cheese without touching it. Don't worry about the lady behind the counter. She thinks everybody's weird. So if you can break the laws of physics, if you can, you realize there are no laws of physics in the astral plane because there's no physics. There's no physicality. How can you have any laws of physics? How can you have any gravity? Gravity only applies from the fourth dimension down. You're in the fifth dimension. So then you will awaken, you will realize you're in the astral plane, and then you can go and travel. This is a difficult practice to do on a regular basis throughout the day, and remember to do it. But if you remember to do it, and you do it throughout the day, when you dream, you will remember to do it in your dream. And if you remember to do it in your dream, and if you are dreaming, and you remember to ask yourself, am I in the astral plane? Am I in my astral body? Let me find out. And you do a jump with the intention of floating, you will float. And poof, you will awaken, you will be lucid, and you can travel. Now, why do we mention this? We mention this because none of the mantras ever worked for us. None of them. Maybe we were doing them wrong. One of the problems we have is we can't roll our R's. I can't roll my R's. So even the Tai Re might have been worked for me if I did it long enough, I guess, or something. I don't know. But I'm not very musical or I have the power of sound, but the power of prayer, the power of the word. I have that power. That's our gift, but not singing and not musically. So for us, for whatever reason, that didn't work. The Anahat sound worked, and discernment worked. So we're just sharing with you what worked for us from experience. We're not saying that the mantras don't work, and we're not saying that the mantras won't work for you. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying is this is what worked for us. And because of that, we put extra emphasis on that based on our experience, based on our experiential knowledge. We're not saying that the mantras might not work for you. The mantras might work for you. But there are also other like we said, there are also other techniques that other people have developed that work for them, which don't involve mantras or any of this stuff, but does involve being aware and being awake, and visualization and concentration and focus. So, for example, somebody posted online that what they do is before they go to bed, they stand in a room, or sorry, in the corner of their room, staring at their bed and committing everything to memory of what it looks like, what the bed looks like from that vantage point. And then as they lie in bed and falling asleep, they do nothing but meditate and visualize that vantage point of standing up in the corner or in the doorway looking at the bed. And if they can do that as they're making the transition from wakefulness to sleep, if they can hold that vision, if they can hold that visualization, and they remember to keep doing that just as their body is falling asleep, they can turn around and walk out the door and actually see their body sleeping in the bed. They can be as the man from Samael's little anecdote. So the body falls asleep, but the mind is still awake, and the mind is watching the body fall asleep. This is a technique that we read about online, just on someone talking about lucid dreaming, and said, this is what I do. He didn't say where he got it from. He didn't say who taught him. For as best as we can tell, he just came up with it himself, and it seemed to work for him. He says, this is how I project into the astral plane. Okay. We encourage you to read this little anecdote that the Master Samael shares. He's talking about meeting up with people in the astral plane who are dead. They're disincarnated, but they don't know they're dead. In other words, they're in limbo. You can find yourself in the astral plane, and sometimes you'll be in the lunar astral plane. You'll be in limbo, and you won't know it. And you'll run into individuals who are lost in the astral plane. They don't know they're dead. They think that they're still alive. And it's an interesting anecdote because you will discover how it's impossible to awaken anyone, even in the astral plane. You can emphatically try to express to that person, hey, wait a minute, you're in the astral plane. You're not, you're dead. You don't have a physical body anymore. And they're like, they won't believe you. They're dreaming. But for them, if you know, when you dream, your dreams are real to you, right? It's a good anecdote. It's a worthwhile read. Finally, we have the mantra here, Egipto or Egipto. Again, you can listen to it, how it's done. And then you have the mantra O, the mantra of the heart. These, by the way, this page, the link which is in the chat, come from the online course, Astral Projection and Dream Yoga. And this is just that link, this page of mantras and so on for astral projection. This is not actually part of the course. It's a supplement. It's a supplementary material to the course. The course itself has 6 lectures. Well, it has an introduction, and then it has these 6 lectures. And then we have the page that I just showed you, mantras for astral projection. And then we have some supplemental material talking about wet dreams, which we can talk briefly about. being attacked by astral larvae, incubi and succubi, which want to fornicate with us while we sleep. And if we are preserving our sexual energy, if we're transmuting our sexual energy, we're not wasting it. That means we're conserving it. But that makes us very attractive hosts, very attractive targets for incubi and succubi who want that energy, who want to feed on our sexual force. And they do so by appearing to us in our dreams. And they will appear to us as beautiful men or beautiful women doing, well, use your imagination, very pleasurable things. And they manage to steal our sexual energy that way by fornicating with us. So that's what a wet dream is. And we want to, as much as possible, avoid those, of course. So one of the things we want to do is launder our sheets regularly. And we want to transmute the sexual force as much as we can. We want to avoid eating excessive amounts of red meat or excessive amounts of spicy food, because that puts extra fire. It adds fuel to the fire, so to speak, and makes us more of an attractive target. Okay, so the important thing to remember about all this is that it's still just the fifth dimension. Yes, it's beneficial. Yes, it's important to awaken the astral plane. Yes, there are things for you to do there. But your journey is not complete just because you can project into the astral plane. And this is what all these new age people get so wrong when they talk about 5D ascension. There's no ascension to 5D. You go there when you sleep. You go there with no effort. It takes no effort to go there. It takes effort to awaken there, of course. But it takes effort to awaken here and now in this moment. But you're here. You might not be awake, but you are here. You're in the astral plane when you dream. You might not be awake, but you're there. You haven't ascended. You haven't done anything. You've gone to sleep. You went to sleep. So awakening is awakening, though. And having practice awakening. And that's why for us, the practice of discernment and the anahat sound work the best, perhaps because for us, the mantras and everything would just, again, just maybe too mechanical, or we weren't doing them right, or we're just not musical enough. We just didn't have that. But when it came to the anahat sound and discernment, that spoke to us. That was more meaningful to us because it was both of those. Well, one was a meditation, and it was becoming more conscious and more aware of the deeper significance of that sound. So it's meditating on the sound and allowing the cricket to appear and emerge from that sound, and understanding and comprehending what that sound actually is. And then, of course, awakening during the day, and that practice of discernment, then practicing that in our dreams, and being able to be in a dream and then awake from the dream. Right? And we find ourselves catching ourselves doing this throughout the day. If you've ever been driving in a car and all of a sudden you look up and you go, oh my God, how did I get here? 20 miles, 30 miles, half an hour have passed by, and you realize you've been sleeping for the past 30 kilometers. Or if you've been on a highway and you've missed your exit. How did you miss your exit? You were asleep. Now, of course, you weren't asleep. Because if you were asleep, you would have crashed the car. You were awake, but your consciousness was asleep. You were dreaming, you were fantasizing, you were thinking about other things, and you weren't paying attention to what you were doing. Your body was driving for you, like a chauffeur. And you were off, and you were in the back seat going la 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 la, thinking about whatever. About maybe you were off, maybe you were going to a meeting, or you were coming home from a meeting, or you're coming home, you're going to a date, you were coming home from a date, you were thinking about the date, you were thinking about the meeting. You weren't thinking about driving. So this thing about awakening and waking up and being present in the moment, this is all connected to lucid or astral projection. So this is the point and the purpose of that practice of discernment, is remembering to check in and remembering to check in. Where am I? Who am I? Right? What am I observing? Why was my attention drawn to it? What, especially in those moments where, if you're observing yourself, you will have moments where your attention is quite literally moved. And it's like you're being pushed to go and look at this thing. Look at it. You see it? In those moments, that's the perfect opportunity to stop and say, okay, who am I? I'm a mortal vessel of my innermost being and divine mother. Okay. What do they want me to look at? They want me to look at that box? That shelf? No. That book. It's that book. Okay. It's the title of the book is written by this person. Take the book off the shelf. Look. Okay. Now, am I in my astral body? Is this the astral plane? Okay. I'm in a crowded bookstore here. I can't jump. But what I can do is I can try to, it's a hardcover book. I'm going to try to put my hand through the book. In those moments where you have that impulse, that being impulse, where your attention is being pushed to a certain way, that's a perfect opportunity, because your consciousness is already, you already have more of a strong link, a strong connection in that moment. Use that opportunity for the key of SOL, subject, object, location. Am I in the astral body? Am I in the astral body? Am I in the astral plane? Do that throughout your day. Make this a habit. As you're observing yourself, make it a part of your self-observation practice. Make this a part of your transformation of impressions, so that when you are transforming your impressions, which you should be doing all the time anyway, and your attention is drawn to something, you have to transform that impression anyway. So take that opportunity to transform the fact that your attention was drawn to that in the first place. Why was it? Who was drawing my attention to that? My innermost being and divine mother wants me to pay attention to. What am I looking at? Why am I being told to pay attention to that? Okay. Now, where am I? Am I in the astral plane? Am I in my astral body? Or am I just trapped in my physical body? Let's find out. Do this on a regular basis, and you will begin to do it in your dreams. And then there is a very strong likelihood that you will awaken in your dreams at the precise moment that you need to see something important in that dream, because you will remember that your attention is being drawn. Who's drawing that? Because your being doesn't sleep. Your divine mother doesn't sleep. There is a section of the dream yoga course Well, there's okay. So lecture 4 talks about interpreting dreams and astral experiences, and then lecture 6 gives examples of dream interpretations. We leave that here for you to do on your own time and your own homework, because this is something that many people have. There are different types of dreams that we can have, and some people dream almost completely in symbols and allegories. Some people, like ourselves, mostly dream in very mundane, sort of ultra realistic dreams. We tend not to dream in symbol and allegory. We tend to dream in very realistic dreams. So there are different schools of thought about interpreting dreams and how one approaches the interpretation of dreams. This course at Glorienne and the book Samael and Vayor related to, well, he has several books related to astral projection and dream yoga, right? He has a book called Dream Yoga. There are different approaches to interpreting dreams. Interpreting dreams is a tenuous process at best. So we have to take our interpretations with a grain of salt. You have to recognize that we can't take our interpretations at face value and run with it and think because I saw this and that in my dream, this is what it means, and now we go and we bet the farm on that. This is not a good approach. This is not a good approach to interpreting dreams. They are at best a shady, shadowy guidance on the path, but we can learn from them. We can learn from them. So it's not something that we should dismiss outright. All right. So I've given you some links. We've given you some techniques. We've talked about some of the perils and some of the issues related to awakening. And also that ultimately all the practices that we've talked about on the core practices all culminate toward the awakening of the consciousness. And what that really means is just knowing yourself, being able to receive information from your innermost being in real time, all the time, and being able to act on that. It is not what people think it is. It is not some sort of mystical, fantastic experience. Being awake it feels very similar to being asleep, except that you're not asleep, you're awake. It's as much the same way that a lucid dream feels like a dream. It's still a dream. Just you're awake instead of dreaming. And that's why doing these practices and awakening in the astral plane is important, because you can feel the difference between being asleep and being awake. Does anybody have any questions? We're at the 3-hour mark, so if you don't have any questions, I'm not surprised. I'm tired.
No.
This concludes our core practices series. We have no idea what we're going to talk about next. We will allow something to come to us. We will allow ourselves to be inspired sometime this week, and then we'll make a post about it Friday or Saturday.
Yeah, so the best way to interpret meanings is basically to ask your innermost being what it means and what it has to teach you. But the process of getting to that point is kind of tedious sometimes.
Well, and part of the challenge of so if you have a dream and you wake up in the middle of the night, so if you're having a dream and you wake up and you don't move your position, and you begin to meditate and retrospect, on the dream that you just had. You can meditate on the dream that you just had, and you can do precisely what you just mentioned, Azazel. You can go into meditation. You can pray your innermost and ask him to interpret and explain what just happened. Now, in our experience, the challenge is usually if you wake up in the middle of the night, or at least in my case, I have to get up and go to the washroom. I can't reasonably enter into meditation if I have to clear my bladder because the two things are in conflict. I can't clear my mind. I can't, right? It's my body wants to empty the bladder, not my mind.
Yeah.
So there's that challenge. The second challenge is if we wake up at 7:30 or whatever at a regular wake up time, and it's time to go to work, it's time to go to school, it's time to have our responsibilities. We can't sit and meditate on our dream right there. People talk about keeping a dream journal and writing down your dreams so that you can meditate on them later, or that because many times we have the same dream occur over and over and over again, recurring dreams. And if you keep a dream journal, you can keep track of these things. We'll be honest with you. We tried keeping a dream journal several different times, and we could never stick with it for whatever reason.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's same here.
Maybe it's because we have atrocious handwriting. Maybe it's because we would write things that we have a dream journal that we've never opened. We have like years worth of dreams written into it sporadically here and there. We've never looked at it. We've never felt the need. We've never been told to. So, like so many things on the path, various different practices are like items on a menu. When you go to a restaurant, you do not eat everything that's on the menu every time. That's not how restaurants work. And in the same way, all of these practices are, in terms of like the we're talking about astral projection now, are there for you to experiment, for you to try, for you to see what works for you. But on the broader picture, the core practices are core practices. Self-observation, self-remembering, meditation, pranayama, transformation of impressions, transmutation of the sexual force, sexual alchemy, when circumstances allow it and when we're ready for it, when we've achieved that level, and awakening of the consciousness, including, but not exclusive to, awakening in the astral plane. And then performing the core practices in the astral plane, which eventually will culminate at some point with us going to a temple of the Great White Lodge and having a ceremony and having to project from the astral plane into the causal plane, which is why we cannot rely on any substances, because there are no substances in the astral plane. So if you travel only when you take substances, well, you're never going to get to the sixth dimension, because to get to the sixth dimension, you get to the sixth dimension from the fifth dimension. There are no substances for you to take. Benjamin says, is it possible to see future events through dreams? Yes, it is. But not every event that you see in the astral plane is of the future, nor does every future event you see in the astral plane come to pass, nor does it exist in the same time frame. So sometimes you can see days into the future, sometimes you can see hours into the future, sometimes you can see years into the future in the astral plane. And you don't know which. But the most important thing is not to believe everything you see in the astral plane, because you could just be in the lunar astral plane and just fantasizing. Magabu says, as a child, I was so pure compared to now. My emotions were stable. It took me a long time to experience many human emotions. As a child, I always felt pity for humanity, since I didn't know compassion. Now I have lost that innocence because of many terrible life experiences: wars, poverty, sickness, betrayal. You've lost innocence, perhaps, but not your ability to feel, and not your ability to feel compassion. I have become as dirty as the lowest in this society. But you're no lower than anybody else. And you're no dirtier than anyone else. It is an attractive, albeit subtle and insidious form of pride to run ourselves down and have and humiliate ourselves, to feel shame, to feel dirty, to look upon ourselves that way. That kind of shame is a kind of trick of pride. So you're no better than anyone else, but you're no worse than anyone else either. This humanity, we're all in this together. We all have our faults. We all have our demons. We all have our defects and vices. And we are all sharing this dirty, polluted society. I mean, that's just, that it is, we're all in this together. My question is, does society taint us, or does society pull out of us what is already there? Society reflects what is already there. Our experiences trigger what is already there. Our experiences are a result of what is already there. We attract those experiences into our life for the very purpose of drawing up and out of us that which is already there, so that we can see it and comprehend it. Because if we didn't have those experiences, in other words, if society wasn't the way it was, if society was a perfect utopia and there was no drama, then there was no indecency, and there was no dirtiness, and there was no all that darkness out there, then there would be nothing to trigger the darkness that we had inside of us. Then we would be living in ignorance of our own darkness. We would live in the superficial utopian world where everybody was happy and everybody got along with everybody else, and everything was perfect. But inside, psychologically, we would be secretly being eaten up by our defects and vices from within. So as within, so without. As above, so below. Everything that we have inside of us has its reflection in the world, so that the world becomes like a mirror into our own soul. Everybody that you encounter that frustrates you, that makes you angry, that makes you afraid, that makes you lustful, every person that comes into your life that triggers your lust or your shame or your envy or your greed, well, that person is a mirror. Or every person that you meet that you judge as greedy or proud or lustful or whatever, that person is a mirror. They're reflecting back at you what you are. And they're drawing it up out of you. That's called the gymnasium of life. That's where you work out to get stronger. You go to the gym to lift heavy weights, right? To test your limits. And believe me, when you go to that bench press, right? That bench press is going to show you what you're made of. That bench press is a mirror, right? To how strong you are and how weak you are. That's those barbells, right? The bench press, the leg press, whatever it is you do, the cardio machine, the rowing machine, right? The weight sled, it doesn't matter. There's a million different things in that gymnasium. That spin class, the yoga class, doesn't matter. You go to that gymnasium to make yourself better by pushing yourself to the limits. And the equipment will tell you, will show you what those limits are. That's what the gymnasium is for, to show you where you are at, to show you what level you are at. But remember that you are at the gym to become better. So no matter what level you are at, the important thing is that a month from now, when you go into that gym, what the machines are showing you is you're a little bit stronger. You're a little bit more flexible. You're a little bit faster. You're a little bit more controlled. That's progress. You're a little bit better than you were a month ago. This is what matters. This is progress. And that's why the world is the way it is, so that we can observe our reactions to it. So that as we age and as we get older and wiser, we can look and say, you know, when I was in my 20s, that guy would have really pissed me off. Now, I laugh. You know, if this would have happened to me in my 30s, I would have fallen apart. Now, I shrug my shoulders and say, it is what it is. You see? There are many things that you can point to. Don't go all the way back to your childhood when you were an innocent, beautiful, untouched babe. Everybody's innocent when they're born. It doesn't count. Go back to when you were a teenager. Go back to into your 20s compared to where you are now. You will find that with age comes wisdom, right? And you will find that there are things that you used to react to all the time that just simply don't bother you anymore. This is what matters. This is what matters. So that each and every time you look in that mirror, you can see a discernible change. And even though we look out into the world and the world seems to be going to hell in a handbasket, that's because the vast majority of people aren't working on themselves. And because we're in the Kali Yuga and every humanity has to die. That's just the reality. That's just, you know, but how we face our death determines the strength of our character. Our level of being. Just how awake are we? Right? All these woke people, you see their videos and all the people reacting to the woke people, you see their videos and the anger and the frustration and the vitriol and the name calling and the condemnation and the judgment, and neither side is woke. Neither side is awake and neither side is awakening. Both of them are sound asleep, and both of them, they think they're fighting. They think they're arm wrestling, but in secret, their egos are holding each other's hand, and hand in hand, they're skipping like little children down the wide and easy path through the wide gate into hell. That's a fact. That's the hard, harsh truth of the world out there and the society out there. And if you allow yourself, if you give in, then yes, you can become tainted by it. You can become affected by it. You can identify with this group and this identity and that political this and that. And you can get caught up in conspiracy theory and politics and war and sexual identity and gender identity and racial identity and religious dogma, and it goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. You can become identified with your football club or your basketball team or your baseball team, right? The world has a million different things to hypnotize you with. Benjamin says, I'm grateful that I've seen so many things in this world that reflects the darkness within. Thank you for this wonderful lesson, sir. The knowledge you are sharing is truly precious and beneficial, like breadcrumbs from our Divine Mother. I'm just starting to learn how to overcome the programming that I've received since I was a child and understand what the scriptures I've read meant. We're glad, and it's a process. It's a journey. So no one needs to rush it, and no one can complete the journey like that. It's not, no one's clipping their heels together. No one's taking any red pills. It's not how it works. It's long and arduous uphill climb up the mountain. But again, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, and like going to the gym, right? The important thing is every time you go to the gym, right, you just feel yourself just a little bit stronger, a little bit of progress, baby steps. But observe yourself, keep track of those little victories, right? You were saying, like, and those precious gifts, those breadcrumbs left for you on the path, they are what are leading you through the dark wood into the light. Do you have anything to add, Azazel?
No, actually, I basically have to call it for a day anyway.
Yes, so do I. Anyone else have any other questions or any comments to share before we call it a day? And as it turns out, call it a week. We'll see you next. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
We are happy that you all were able to join us today. We hope that you have a wonderful week and a productive week, whatever it is that you're working on these days. And that we also wish you all the best and pray for a renewed progress on the path. We hope that this was beneficial. We hope that this series on core practices was beneficial. We invite you to go back and review anything that you feel you should, and also remember that we've, in all of our live streams, we have linked many useful resources like we've done today. The Dream Yoga Astral Projection course on glorian.org, and everything that we covered in the core practices, there is much more information available to you online at Glorian and through the books and through other affiliate sources. So don't feel by any stretch of the imagination that we are the be all and the end all of the information that is available to you, because there's a great deal more information out there. Okay, so see you both and have a nice weekend ahead. A week ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you, Benjamin. Eric, thanks for the breadcrumbs, brother. Thank you, Eric, for being here. Thank you, Azazel, for joining us as always.
Yeah.
And well, inferential peace, everyone. Have a good week.
Yeah. Bye.